new LinkedIn Hiring Pro can't undo your last hire, the no-show. Who set you back because they didn't show up on day one, or day two, or ever again. And now your product launch is delayed because you're talking to alien abduction podcasters to track them down. But LinkedIn Hiring Pro can help make sure your next hire sticks. In fact, businesses who use LinkedIn are 24% less likely to reopen a role in the next 12 months. Hire right the first time with LinkedIn Hiring Pro. Post a free job today at linkedin.com/quality.
This episode is brought to you by Accenture. When your advertising operations fall out of sync, everything else follows. Spotify and Accenture are working together to reinvent the rhythm of ad sales, using automation, analytics, and smarter workflows to simplify campaign delivery and access better data across the business. The result? Less time spent on operations, more time connecting brands with the moments and fandoms that matter most. Learn more at accenture.com/Spotify.
Welcome to Unbound, the podcast with Beth Curry, author, storyteller, and survivor. This is where books meet real life, where Beth reads chapters from her work and breaks free from the traditional audiobook format, diving deeper into the personal experiences, lessons, and liberation behind every page. Nothing is off limits. Let's get unbound.
Hi, welcome back to Unbound. I'm Beth Curry. This is Season 4, Invisible Daughter. Last episode, we talked about the caregiver role being manufactured and how it's manufactured, the production line and the history, the economics, the parallel curricula for sons and daughters. Today, I'm going to get specific. Money and identity, two very different kinds of cost, both real, both significant, both never discussed, honestly, So I want to give you an exercise. Think about the last month, everything you did for family members that a professional would charge for. Medical appointment coordination, babysitting, insurance calls, researching treatment options, emotional support, mediating, planning a family event, financial research, legal paperwork, transportation, any of it. Now assign the professional rates. So a healthcare advocate charges $50 to $150 an hour. I don't know. Family therapist charges $100 to $200 an hour. A care coordinator charges $25 to $75. An event planner, financial researcher, personal organizer, each of them has a market rate. I don't know what it is. Add up your hours, multiply by the going rate, For many daughters, that number for a single month runs into the thousands. Annually, it often equals a significant portion of a professional salary, sometimes more. I did this exercise myself, and the number that came back changed something in how I understood what I'd been doing all these years. Not because I want to turn family care into a transaction, but again, because naming the economic value of invisible labor is one of the most powerful ways of finally making it visible, right? Now, globally, economists estimate that women provide between $10 and $39 trillion worth of unpaid care work annually. The range is wide because the work is really hard to measure, right? But even the lower bound would constitute the largest economy in the world. So I'm going to tell you about two women whose economic stories kind of illustrate very differently the dimensions of this reality. So first there's Wanda. She calculated the economic value of her family contributions, and her father suggested during a financial discussion that she wasn't contributing enough to the family. So she decided to do this, and, he was pretty nasty, implying, her financial contributions kind of sucked. She spent 2 weeks documenting everything, everything that she had done, therapy, care, work, admin type stuff, event planning, so family dinners, things like that. The total for 12 months, just over $20,000 in professional services she provided for free. She says, when I shared those numbers, my father was genuinely shocked. He had only been thinking about financial contributions and who was paying for what. He had never once considered the invisible labor had a market value. To him, it was just what I did. It was just how I was. And that response again, which, happened in an earlier episode, it's just how she is how the production line stays invisible. By framing daughter's labor as personality rather than work, families avoid acknowledging what they're receiving and what it actually costs. I also talked to Yvonne. She calculated a kind of economic cost It was different, not the value of services provided, but the career advancement she had to give up to remain available for family. She declined a significant professional opportunity to stay geographically close to her aging parents. Across several categories, the salary increase she declined and the advancement opportunities she missed and the professional development she couldn't invest in, the lifetime earning differential from staying in a less optimal job market, all of it, her estimate, it exceeded $500,000 in lifetime earning potential. So it was shocking to me. She says, I'd never done the math before. I knew I was making sacrifices. I didn't understand I was essentially donating hundreds of thousands of dollars of my future to my family's care without anyone, including myself, ever naming it as such. So together, Wanda and Yvonne's stories show these two dimensions of the economic cost, the value of what you give and the value of what you forgo. And both are real, right? They're both very real. There's another economic dimension worth talking about too, because it kind of reveals something particularly painful about how these systems operate. When daughters provide unpaid care, sacrificing career advancement, personal resources in the process, the economic benefit often flows to other family members. The family saves money on professional services, and those savings accumulate as family wealth, and that wealth gets distributed through inheritance in ways that rarely account for the contribution daughters made through their labor. So Miriam watched this happen in her family after her grandma passed. Her mother had provided daily care for 15 years, and her uncle had visited monthly and was treated as a devoted son. Now, in the estate, her uncle inherited the family business, and her mom inherited household items and sentimental objects. She says, my mom donated 15 years of unpaid labor, and if that labor had been compensated at professional rates, it would have exceeded the value of everything that went to my uncle. But because it was unpaid and provided by a daughter, it wasn't factored into the distribution. Now, this is the invisible intergenerational wealth transfer that happens inside families where daughters provide the care and others receive the assets. So I want to shift from the economic cost to something kind of harder to quantify, but just as real. So what happens to you, your sense of self, and your relationship with your own experience when you spend years prioritizing everyone else's needs, feelings, and preferences over your own? What happens? You disappear. Invisible daughter, right? You disappear. It's just a gradual thing, right? It's just like it's gradual. One day you look at a picture, that's faded when it was left in the sun for too long, and you look at it and you could barely make out what used to be there. That's the same for you. And what it looks like from the inside, it kind of starts with a preference suppression. You learn to say, I don't care when asked what you want, right? Not because you don't have preferences, but because expressing them feels risky. It's just simpler and smoother and safer to say you don't mind. And over time, this just becomes automatic and you stop accessing your preferences before you even know that you're doing it. And then comes emotional displacement, okay? You become so focused on monitoring and managing others' emotions that you lose track of your own. And when someone asks how you're doing, you answer with information about everyone around you. No one asked about them, they asked about you, but you can't locate you, right? Then need minimization. So you convince yourself you don't really need much while being acutely aware of everyone else's needs. Your threshold for what counts as legit personal need gets kind of calibrated by years of comparison to everyone else's more obvious and more urgent and more validated needs, right? If this goes on long enough as well, identity integration. The caregiving becomes so central to who you are that you can't imagine yourself outside of it. If you're not needed, you're not really sure who the hell you are anymore. Right? So this is where many invisible daughters find themselves, not so much hopeless and not so much broken, but kind of hollowed out in a specific way and experts on everyone else's inner life. And they're strangers to their own, One of the most disorienting aspects of identity erosion is what I'd call the comparison problem. You're so deeply familiar with other people's emotional landscapes and their dreams and their fears and their preferences and their complexity. And, when you compare your own internal experience to theirs, you seem flat by contrast, empty, right? Less, vivid. Where others seem to have these clear preferences and strong emotions and obvious dreams and passionate interests, you feel vague and undefined. But you're not. right? What happened is that your capacity for self-knowledge, the same capacity that gives other people that vivid sense of their own inner life, got redirected outward, and you applied it entirely to other people, and yourself went unexplored, right? Now, I talked to Betty, and she described it this way. She says, I thought I was just a boring person. Everyone around me seemed to have strong opinions and clear interests, and I felt flat by comparison. It took a long time to understand I wasn't boring. I'd just been trained to ignore my own experience so completely I couldn't access it anymore. So in her case, she didn't disappear. Herself didn't disappear. It just hadn't been visited in a long-ass time. So recovery from identity erosion is possible. It is slow. It requires a hell of a lot of patience because you're not healing from a wound exactly. You're kind of excavating something that got buried, right? So you're going to start small. You're going to notice what you actually want for lunch rather than just defaulting to whatever's easiest for everyone else. Maybe express a genuine opinion about something kind of low stakes, choosing an activity because you enjoy it rather than because it serves someone else's need. These feel absurdly small. They're not small. They are the beginning of learning to be interested in your own experience again. Turning the attention you've applied so generously to everyone else's inner life back towards yourself. I spoke to June. She spent 3 years doing this work. She called it simply learning to show up for herself. She said, I had to start at the very beginning. What do I like? What do I find interesting? What makes me feel like myself? These questions sound simple. I had no idea how to answer any of them. So the recovery for her wasn't about becoming selfish. It was about becoming whole and about understanding that the care she extended so freely to others could include herself. That's the work. That's it. That's the work. And it's totally worth doing. Next episode, I'm going to go into the burnout that nobody sees because you're so good at hiding it. And what happens to your marriage when your emotional capacity is consistently consumed before you get home. If you've ever felt completely drained and unable to explain why to someone who loves you, that's this conversation coming up next episode. I'm going to leave you with a question. When someone asks what you want, not what everyone needs, but what you want, what happens inside of you? Notice the answer. Or notice the absence of one. I'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to Unbound with Beth Curry. Join the conversation in the Facebook group or visit author.bethcurry.com. Want to support the show? Head to ko-fi.com/unbound podcast. Until next time, stay unbound.